folks that are great friends and contributors for OTT.X for many of our events, and we're really grateful for your support. Next up, we're going to bring on a panel, and we're going to talk about operational challenges. And we have a really, really powerful group of folks here. These are people that have been a part of supply chain operations for streaming and download video, literally from the very beginning. People that have solved many of the problems and are working on solving the continual increase in problems. So I'm really, really excited to hear from this group, and happy to introduce our next panel, talk about operational challenges in OTT. Their moderator, David Chu, he is the EVP and GM at Cinedigm Networks. Kira Baca, the Chief Revenue Officer at Rightsline. Mike Barron, Senior VP of Sales and Strategy for the Americas at Friend MTS. Mike, I believe that I'm going to have to give you, no, there you are, fantastic. Davinder, Luthra, the Global Digital Leader at Spherex. Craig Seidel, Chief Technology Officer at Pixelogic Media. And Michael Thomson, VP of Global Operations, North America and Latin America for BBC Studios. So an esteemed group of panelists, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Yes, OTT.X put together a wonderful, diverse group of panelists with enormous experience to shed light and give you some more insight on all the myriad kind of operational challenges that media companies and streamers encounter. You know, being prepared and having the right tools and workflows to manage operations is so critical in today's day and age. Eric just gave a very brief intro on everyone on the panel, but I'd like, you know, without going into too much detail about everything your company does, because that could take too much time, can you just each of you give a little brief intro on your role within your organization? Why don't we start with Kira?
Thank you. Kira Baca. I'm at Rightsline. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, which means I oversee all sort of the business relationships from sales through to customer success. And Rightsline is I would say, the market leader in the media and entertainment industry for rights solutions, rights and financial solutions. So IP management, contractual management, royalties. So I always, as a brief description of what we do, I always say we are like the key information of what you own, what you can do with it, and who gets paid. So a pretty pivotal part of this supply chain, and I'm certainly happy to be on with a bunch of people I've known and work with now, and worked with in many different lives, you know, throughout the years, including yourself, David. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you here. And Cinedigm works with Rightsline, and you know, we wouldn't know what to do without them. They're so critical in terms of kind of our supply chain. Craig.
Good morning and afternoon. I'm Craig Seidel. I'm CTO at Pixelogic. Pixelogic is a post-production distribution company. We basically take whatever is given to us in the way of picture and sound and do everything that needs to be done before it hits your screen. That's theatrical, disc, and streaming. We do a whole lot of localization, subs and dubs and things like that as well. I just want to add that formerly I was at Movie Labs, where I developed or led the development of a bunch of distribution standards, collectively known as the Movie Labs Digital Distribution Framework, or MDDF. Some of you might be familiar with it. Also is involved in the creation of ITER. Thanks.
Thanks, Craig. Davinder.
Yes, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well. Thanks very much for hosting this panel as well, OTT.X. So my name is Davinder Luthra. I'm from Spherex, and I'm responsible for all of our strategic relationships and global growth. What Spherex does is we solve really two big problems, operationally speaking. Number one is we're the world's largest provider of local age ratings. So whenever you've got a piece of content, film, television, music video, anything like that, animation, that's going from the US into Brazil, or from France into Portugal, or wherever it might be, Spain into Brazil, wherever, we're the ones that can ensure that you comply to local regulations. So the Ministry of Justice in Brazil, the General Directorate in Mexico, things like that. So we do comprehensively all of those local age ratings. That's the first big problem we solve. The second big problem we solve is that we have an AI machine learning platform that essentially interrogates that video and will tell you exactly how much contentious material or what the right cultural fit is for that content. Whether you've got a large catalog that's running on a fast platform or a premium release original content that's going D2C, we have a solution for that. And so that presents a whole bunch of operational issues that you have to contend with, either as a rights holder, a platform, a distributor, or a content creator. And it's as critical today as it's ever been, especially given all the distribution that's going on now.
Thank you so much, Davinder. Michael Thomson.
I just want to throw in good evening for those of us who are in London right now. I work for BBC Studios out of New York normally. We're the commercial arm of BBC, content distributor, provider, owner of branded services platforms, primarily in North America and Latin America, but around the globe, obviously. My role is specifically to the Americas. Yeah, we have lots of content. My team does all the content preparation, content operations, content distribution and delivery to service all of these businesses that come out of my company.
Wonderful, Michael. And Mike Barron.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. My name is Mike Barron. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales and Strategy for the Americas for Friend MTS. Friend MTS is a pioneer and global leader in content protection and anti-piracy services. We really work across all the stakeholders, content owners, broadcasters, operators, with advanced security solutions, forensic watermarking, fingerprinting, content monitoring, and legal enforcement, and then providing business intelligence. And ultimately, what our solutions provide is, one, we disrupt real world piracy, which is a multi-billion-dollar issue within the industry. We safeguard revenues and help stakeholders to maximize investment both on live and premium content.
Thank you so much. And before we kind of get started in our conversation and with questions, I thought it was just a little important to give a little more detail as to what some of the panelists do and what some of their companies do, because this, in the operations arena, it's highly technical. People in the industry are constantly learning. And when OTT.X puts together these panels, it's not just for our audience just to gain insights, but it's also to provide, business opportunities in case you need those services. In this day and age, we have to be on point as to getting the right workflows correct. Kira, in today's streaming world, you really can't compete unless you have really large content libraries. And how important is it to have the right solutions on the content rights management side?
Yeah, I mean, I often preach this, I'm sure, to acquire, but when you think about rights, it really is like it's all the information, the Bible, whatever you want to call it, that tells you what you can and can't do with it. So in order to, you really need to think about having a solution that provides that information that can consolidate it, right? Because I think one of the biggest challenges across media companies, whether they're large or small, is going to be having information stored in different systems, in spreadsheets, in somebody's desk. We're certainly getting further away from the physical aspect of how people keep information, but in the digital age, we've taken some of those bad habits into the workplace. And so consolidation, one source of truth really starts at, I think, at the rights and the inception of IP. So you can talk about catalog, you can talk about creating content or acquiring content, but you need to make sure you have it stored in an easily accessible single source of truth for the content that you quote unquote own or have licensed and are going to put onto your service. And then ideally, that solution is interconnected. And that's one of the points I was looking forward to expressing, that we live in a modern technology age where solutions are now being, competing on the ability to connect to other systems. And the importance of that is going to be your time to market. And as these, certainly with our Latin American audience, if you're acquiring content or making content or putting content out, your only real goal, if we just get down to, the brass tacks, is to execute a strategy to make money. Commerce is that's the story, right? Everyone's putting this content out to make money for it in one capacity or other, whether that's ad revenue or subscription, or still direct to consumer, and the ability to do that and maximize your revenue is going to come to that time to market. So I know I went a little bit down a windy path, but I think it really starts with making sure you can get the information clearly that outlines your best path to your strategic goal, which is to maximize your revenues, and looking for systems. And being on this panel, one of the things I had recognized before was that with the other solutions providers, that modern platform is what we're all sort of that building off of, so that you can choose a Rightsline or another rights platform if it connects to these other these other solutions, with the goal of streamlining all the way through to operations. And there are some companies that do that very well. I don't want to sound too sassy, but Cinedigm has always been a leader in how to get, how to maximize your audience, but also how to streamline your operations. BBC is also a great leader at that as well, and started doing that many years earlier. So.
Thank you so much. I know, coming from a startup world and building kind of OTT streaming channels, once you have a good amount of content, you need a content rights management system. You can't get away with this on Excel spreadsheets or things like that. You have to protect those rights very carefully. This question is from Mike Barron. In this digital age, piracy has always been around, and it's rampant. Let's say YouTube, largest video platform in the world, they have sophisticated copyright management and identification tools, but specifically for other streamers and broadcasters and, pay TV companies, live sporting, for instance, it's enormous sums of money to license sporting rights and to protect those rights, to ensure there's no piracy. Can you give us some insight to how you work with networks and streamers to provide these important layers of protection?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you framed that up beautifully. And I'll just kind of tag on to what Kira was saying as far as maximizing revenue. I mean, in the world where sports rights, particularly live sports rights, are exorbitant, and the investment is so large, but it's also perishable in the sense that you watch it once, so it's not, it's not replicated, so you have to protect it. So what we recommend, really taking a proactive approach, future-proofing your content. And what I mean by that is, from your planning, from the point of planning, you want to have a solid DRM part of your system. You want to watermark, you want to monitor, you want to enforcement, you want to enable these safeguards. So in the case something is pirated, you have a remedy to defend against it. Because if you don't, and once that cat's out of the bag, you've lost the game for all intents and purposes. Adding to that, understanding your platform is very, very important. You want to be able to, you want to audit your platform to understand your vulnerabilities, so you can be proactive versus reactive on what you need to do to protect your platform. Because what happens is, you want to maintain your subscriber base, because if something's if it's free, people will take it for free. This also helps preventing churn, so you're not losing subscribers. And ultimately, you want to protect your revenue. And by not having it protected, it's a loss of revenue because people will find it elsewhere.
Thank you so much, Mike. Craig, with the rise of global streaming services, and really we're living in the era of peak TV, where enormous sums of money go into the production of content, movies and television shows. You can't just show it in your local market. You have to go to global platforms, and you have to showcase it around the world and exploit it in all the different corners. Localization plays an important role. Can you discuss a little further and sort of what's involved in terms of preparing content originating in one language and delivered to another, and also how it's not just content, it's really the metadata behind the content as well.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Can I just jump in and follow up on something Mike said?
Absolutely.
Sports is a really fascinating market, especially when it comes to advertising, because it's live and people love to watch it. And that's what makes it so important to protect. So when Mike was talking about in terms of protecting it, it doesn't do you any good if people are going to pirate it. There's the flip side of it, which is like with AVOD or more specifically FAST. That's, even though it's like high value content, sometimes it's considered the other end of the spectrum in terms of it's just there and it's free. So why would anyone pirate it? So in some ways, we're talking about two different worlds of content protection, even though it's the same kind of platforms and the same kind of streaming. I just also want to say I have great respect for what Mike does, because it's really, really hard and really, really important, and saves companies, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions if they're big companies. Yeah. So onto the localization part. There's a lot of steps. I'm just going to sort of outline what it looks like, just so people have a sense for it. So like when it takes a really long time to do something, you understand why. So we get in picture and sound, and the sound, it will be what we call OV, original version. Let's just say for argument's sake, it's English. We'll then take that and create a detailed script of everything that happens that requires something that happens downstream. So the most obvious one is what people say. So all the text, every word that's spoken. But if you might also need laughs and grunts and things like that recorded. They're called efforts. But we're also going to need other descriptions, because descriptive audio for people who can't view the picture, we'll do audio tracks for people to describe what's going on. As a matter of fact, it's a real big audience. People do watch. Listen to content who can't watch it. In people who are visually impaired watch in the same proportion to people who are sighted. So it's a part of the market not to ignore. At any rate, all that stuff has to be captured, and then that's ultimately turned into subtitles and descriptive audio, subtitles for the deaf and hearing impaired, which is a little bit different. They have, like say things like music is playing and so forth. And then there's scripts that are created for descriptive audio, for dubbing and so forth. All that then needs to be translated, because the people who are doing the dubbing or the subtitles will get translated to different languages. So that work has to be done in territory. If it's not being done in territory, watch out, because people get stale on the local idioms and sayings and so forth. So if people aren't local, they'll tend to use terms and so forth that just sound weird when playing locally. And again, the more specific you can get, the better. And then all that stuff gets put together, which is also a non-trivial task, packaged up and then sent out. So that's in a nutshell, the process of localizing things and getting it ready. There's other things that happen along the way, like removing commercial black that might be in there, or adding points to insert ads, and a bunch of miscellaneous details. But that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Craig. Craig just kind of detailed some key areas to ensure content is ready to be distributed across different territories. Another important area is to ensure that content is properly vetted. You want to ensure that content is not culturally offensive, or that it could pass regulatory bodies in certain countries or censorship boards. Davinder, can you discuss how your company provides critical support in these areas?
Yeah, happy to. So let me just basically boil it down to a few simple concepts, and then I'll give some operational recommendations. So broadly speaking, right, all the governments and the regulators in the world care about how consumers are acting and react to the content that's being presented in their local homes, or in their cinemas, or on their DVDs and their Blu-rays, right? So they take great care and stewardship and very serious fiduciary responsibility. Traditionally, that's always been sort of separated, right? It's been watershed with linear broadcast, or it's been very separate for theatrical and home entertainment box releases. Now, obviously, this great, wonderful revolution called streaming has swept through the entire world, accelerated very heavily with COVID. the governments of the world, in Latin America, for example, there's 30 countries there, right? You can't just sort of trade it as a block. There's 30 countries. There's very significant, important digital markets, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, and so on. So these governments have really, spent a long time thinking about how they manage all of the updated rules and policies and procedures that they need to cope with this influx of streaming, because a lot of it is very, edgy kind of stuff, right? And you've got all of course, new ways of accessing the content. So what most governments have done is they've moved to a co-regulation environment. This has happened in Brazil. This has happened in the UK. This has happened in India. This is happening in Australia. It's happening all over the world. And Latin America is certainly no different. So what this means is people that own content, they have platforms, they're linear broadcasters, they're moving into FAST and AVOD, etc. They have to have the right tools and workflows and systems to think about how they best articulate the value of their content. That means they need to have advisories, they need to have synopsis, artwork, and local ratings and all the rest of it, right? So that's really important, because you need to allow for parents to make informed choices, protect children from harm, and at the end of the day, protect your brand, right? If you're a big producer, highly prominent producer of content. So it's a complicated operational problem. The best way to solve that is to really understand what's the deconstruction of the main kind of classifiable events inside of your content. So how much alcohol is in it, drugs, violence, sexual, profanity, nudity, all of that. And how does that line up against cultural norms, preferences, and of course the rules and the regulations of the land. And it's very different, it's very dynamic. Brazil just changed its laws in April, right? And we've been doing huge sweeps of audits, working with streaming platforms and AVOD providers to help them comply with the new auto classification scheme that's getting rolled out over there. So what Spherex does with our AI and machine learning platform is that we have codified all of these world's rules and policies and procedures inside of our system so that we can ingest titles and essentially help you know well ahead of the game what kind of potential conflict situations or non-compliance events you may or may not come into in any particular territory for any given title. And it really does vary, right? I mean, for example, a John Wick, right? The recent release, it was a 12 in France, but it got a C in Mexico, which is the 18. A recent release, Gossip Girls, it was essentially rated all ages in Japan and places like Italy, but it got like a 16, right, for sexuality in Brazil. So just because you know what the US rating is, the UK rating, doesn't mean that you know what the the Brazilian rating would be and all the rest of it. So all of that is to say, essentially what the organization needs to have is a playbook, right? So what is my standards and practices playbook? How am I going to calibrate that against the business model that I'm exploiting the content through, SVOD, TVOD, FAST, AVOD, and then how much operational constraints and practices do I need to put in place? Obviously, I have a different treatment if I've got a gardening show, a gardening channel, evergreen on AVOD versus I've got some real premium release happening on my D2C. I have different treatments of operations that I need to apply to that. So that's what Spherex does specifically from a rating and a cultural fit perspective, is that we'll help everybody calibrate that. And Latin America, again, 30 countries there, right? It's an incredibly complicated region. There are 20 million people between the age of 12 and 16 in Brazil, right? So how you rate that content being 10, 12, 14, 16 in Brazil, because that's the rating system, matters. How you rate that in Mexico, right? Is it an AA, an A, a B, a B15, a C, etc. matters because that's the rating system. So that's what we do. And we've got a lot of experience working with Latin America.
Thank you, Davinder. Craig, you wanted to add something about further kind of compliance areas regarding content for distribution in globally?
Yeah, so actually we work with Spherex and what they do is very important. When you're looking at licensing content to put on your platform, something to be aware of is that there's kind of a wide range of quality associated with dealing with compliance. And sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, when it doesn't matter, it's done the cheap way, and when it does, it's done the more expensive ways. But like, for example, if someone says a bad word, the simplest thing to do is to drop the audio or to do a beep or whatever it may be. The more expensive option is to dub in, some alternative word. Sometimes it's done well, sometimes it's done awkwardly. And the really expensive way is sometimes they actually shoot titles to have different ratings in different territories. There's like the Thomas Crown Affair, there's a scene with some nudity in it. They actually shot that scene twice. This can also be done in post-production. So for example, if someone is holding a cigarette in their fingers, you can actually remove the cigarette. They're still holding their fingers in an awkward way, but it complies with the smoking requirement. You can have, a newspaper held up where there might be some nudity involved. So but when you're licensing content, you might be getting the good ways or you might be getting the cheap ways, depending on, what the sources are of that content and what interests the studio or someone else has. Just something to be aware of when you're licensing, to make sure that you get the appropriate level for your customer base.
Thank you, Craig. Michael Thomson, you work for a huge broadcaster. You guys produce so many shows. You play a key role with regards to global operations, North America and LATAM. Can you discuss some of the kind of key challenges or issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, especially as it relates to getting content to market?
Sure. Everything these guys said already, whether it's DRM, privacy, piracy, compliance, there are language issues, localization. I mean, Sherlock is a great example of localization where it's not just narrating, as Greg said, it's everything else that happens. Sherlock with the Benedict Cumberbatch version, there's a lot of on-screen text that flies around that's clues to the story, what he's looking about, and he sees, a street name, and that comes out, and it's a very graphic overlay. And when you try to release that into a foreign market, you've got to account for that, and there's a production budget behind it, but it's huge to try to do that kind of work. Down to what Keir was saying, where you cannot have enough information about your content. You need to know the rights positions. You need to be able to expose that information, but you also need to know a lot about your content itself, all the metadata you can associate it with it. There's never enough information because it matters what market you're going into. You would love to have metadata tags that tell you exactly where all of your language issues may exist, or where certain more sensitive, culturally sensitive sections are. You want that data, you need to house it somewhere, and you need to expose it quickly and easily, because in this ever increasing marketplace, everybody wants something faster. You don't have as much time as you used to have to prep a deal, get the content organized together, and then ship it out the door to their spec. Now you're sometimes given literally weeks to pull off huge deliveries, particularly in the fast market, where it's literally the name and literally the culture of it. Get it out fast. We need it now. So in a nutshell, those are all the challenges. Another bit, which is crucial, is as more and more companies go back into their deeper catalogs, they're pulling up content that has not seen the light of day since the 90s, the 80s, even further beyond. Again, tons of compliance issues. Humor that was funny then does not necessarily translate today, whether it's language issues, comments, what have you. And then there's the technical aspects of it. In what quality was that oftentimes videotape stored? And is that the best quality you can get? And will that match what the platform is seeking? We've had a lot of issues with our SD content where platforms will only accept HD content. So we have to go through the process of doing up converts, and that doesn't always hold up so well. Technology isn't a magic wand. It doesn't always do everything all the time. So you have to do a lot of, you have to understand your content. You have to really, at a molecular level, really do understand what your content is, what it contains, because if you want to monetize it, you need to do it quickly. And what you don't want to find yourself in a situation is where you've got a buy list, you've got a signed deal, you've got deadlines, and then the content just can't get out the door because it's stuck in a supply chain situation where you're trying to do compliance edits or you're trying to patch content together to fit. So those are a lot of the challenges. Did I miss any?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of bases, and you touch upon, quality control issues. I know for us, when you're dealing in this day and age, a publisher isn't just necessarily an SVOD player. You have a multitude of models now where you're SVOD, you're AVOD, you're hybrid, you're fast. And when you have a large library and you're SVOD in one area and you're fast in another, you have to ensure that your content that's going into advertiser-supported areas is safe. Because if you're, let's say, carried on a fast platform and an ultra-violent scene goes through, or God forbid, nudity goes through, and your channel can get kicked off the platform from one title. So, quality control is such an important area within the scope of operations that, people have to manage very, very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of platform vulnerabilities, I know, Mike Barron, one of the things that your company does, stressing being proactive instead of reactive. And one of the services you provide is doing a security audit. Can you tell us a little bit more about that for publishers?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. When we look at a security audit, what we essentially do is we take a look at where leaks are coming from. We identify those leaks, and then we identify the pirate networks. By understanding where those leaks are coming from, we're able to feed back intelligence to the platform owner, and then provide solutions on how to remedy. With that, it also kind of leads into, we're talking a lot about the territorial rights, and this might be a little bit kind of going outside of the scope of the conversation, but a lot of what we're seeing too with rights holders that have legal rights is their content is either infringing upon other territories where stakeholders have the rights to. So the ability to, one, defend what is currently leaking from your particular platform, but also defend against outside rights holders' content coming into your territory as well. So it's a pretty broad picture, but from the standpoint, going back to this idea of auditing your platform, it's, how do I say this in the most tactful way? It's never easy to say, hey, my baby is not maybe the best looking, but understanding that you have problems allows you to, going back to this reactive, proactive, being proactive of fixing that, so you're able to preserve all these things that we've talked about, your churn, your subscriber numbers, your investment.
Thank you. This is a LATAM focused event, and certainly a lot of the challenges North American companies go through, same set of challenges Latin American companies go through. But this is really a question for the group. Just in terms of some of the business that you may be doing in Latin America, or some of the areas where you can give advice as to Latin American companies really doing business in North America. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I could say something real quick. So I think, I go back to my earlier point, to the idea of a standard and practices playbook, right? So especially if you are running a pretty significant aggregation of audiences in Latin America, and you may be affiliated, let's say, to a global company, a US organization, you've got a lot of content, right? That's probably coming in, that's US country of origin, UK country of origin. And again, just because it's of that and it's within the sister family of networks, doesn't mean it's a right fit or an appropriate fit for your audience, for needing to be calibrated against the rating systems and all the rest of it. So again, whether it's you have that direct to consumer relationship, you're piggybacking on a channel experience with one of the big Amazons or Apples, or one of those digital experiences, or if it's a fast environment through something else, you really do have to go, and it's better to go through that planning, standards and practices, calibration process upfront, rather than, of course, wasting a lot of time up against the gun in terms of the clock, and then just realizing you have to, do all the ratings, do all the localization. Understanding all of that upfront with the playbook, with the standards and practices playbook, is really, really critical. And it just helps get everyone in the organization on the same page. I think from a lessons learned, that's probably one of the most pivotal things, and it's upfront planning. And it can be pretty comprehensive.
Got it. I know we only have a minute or two left. Is there any questions from the audience or questions among the panelists that you'd like to learn from one another?
I'd actually like to slip in a public service announcement. OTT.X has been extremely active in terms of developing standards and practices for people to do things the same way, so you don't have to deal with different partners in different ways for a lot of efficiency. So Eric can tell you all about them. There's working groups within OTT.X, and there's a lot of material already published. So if you're looking to do something, odds are someone's done it before, and you don't have to invent the wheel, work off what's been developed. There's EMA avails, which Kira probably works with at some point with the rights, and just a whole bunch of things. So topic for another session, but just wanted to make people aware.
No, Craig, I think you bring up a great point, and that's, OTT.X. It's almost like a family of media companies that really work together and have become friends and rely on one another. So and also a great resource as well.
Yeah, as a group, we have much to learn from each other, and it is helpful to be in conversations to know that the thing I'm struggling with, I'm not alone.
Well, I certainly learned a lot, and even about some of the services that your companies provide, and we're already working with some of you. But I just wanted to thank all of the panelists today, and hope the audience members got a lot of insight into the things that were said. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you
are
much.
very grateful for all of your time and all the work that you've done over the last actually couple of decades, all of you in this space. I've been working in the supply chain space since around 2005 or something, way back when I worked at Microsoft, and many of these folks I was working with then and have been a part of the solutions that are available now. I think that it's just important to keep in mind that if you're in this business and you're distributing content or making content, the operational challenges or the operational issues, just you cannot ignore them. The manual processes and systems that you might be using now are just not going to scale if you're trying to grow your business, and very soon the systems that you have in place, if they are manual, are just going to kind of turn into a swirling vortex of manual systems and an insatiable demand for human resources that is going to quickly escalate and make it pretty impossible to grow. So many of these folks are very involved in our working groups at OTT.X, and I just want to make another plug to get involved, be a part of our family, as David mentioned, the community that we have of folks that have been helping each other for such a long time, and you can really avail yourself of their support. So with that,